What's going on, everybody? Shonen Express here, coming to you with another Shonen Express podcast. I'm a little late getting this podcast out. It's probably going to be Thursday or maybe even Friday by the time I actually release this episode. But I was away this weekend. I had some other things going on, so I wasn't able to get to the chapters and be able to record until now. But we are here. We are back for the Shonen Express podcast, and we are ready to get into this. If you're new to this podcast, first of all, like and subscribe. I'd love for you to do that. I'm going to put out more of these podcasts every single week, so I'd love for you to like and subscribe. But you should also know that we're going to review everything that comes out in Weekly Shonen Jump every single week. That's what this podcast does. And because I know not everybody reads everything going on in the magazine, I have left the timestamps in the description of this video or podcast, however you're watching this. I've left the timestamps for when I talk about certain series so that you don't get spoiled, right? And I want to make sure that you don't hear information that you didn't sign on for. And so that's why I put those down in the descriptions. But without wasting too much time, I want to get right into the magazine this week and what went on. And so that brings us to our first chapter this week, which was the cover, which went to Mission Yozakura family. This week, chapter 199 came out. It's crazy to think that next week we are going to get chapter 200 of Mission Yozakura family. This is one of those series that I was here at the very beginning of. In fact, I think if you look back in my channel, one of the very first videos I made was about Mission Yozakura family. So it holds a place, on this channel that is deep and close to my heart. So it's cool to see it almost have 200 chapters and to still be going. But the chapter itself was really great. I loved the single color page with Taiyo communicating with Ryu. I thought that looked great. The double color page spread with the whole family laying in the grass was great. Usually the color pages in this series look very beautiful. They look great. I love how vibrant the colors in this always are when Gundira gets to do color pages like this, and this is no exception. The chapter itself was mainly focused right on Ryu and Taiyo and their argument. What I love about this is Ryu is stuck in his ways. He's not gonna budge, and even by the end of this chapter, it doesn't really seem like he wants to move on his opinion that he is a poor excuse for a surrogate father for Katana. And Taiyo meets him with that level of dedication. And what I actually love about this is I love that Taiyo's blooming ability, the hardening, seems to lend itself to this kind of engagement to be useful here, right? So Ryu is going to be able to hit Taiyo with everything he has, and Taiyo's own ability makes it so that he's incredibly hard to damage. And so he was able to take that first punch that Ryu sent out in this chapter with no issue, and then even deal a massively strong punch back to Ryu, but it wasn't enough, of course. Ryu is one of the strongest characters I think that we've seen in the series, and so that didn't really surprise me. But what did surprise me is at the end of the chapter, we get the reveal of a new kind of blooming, right? A blooming that apparently doesn't take away, doesn't harm the user like the other blooming that Taiyo would use before, which siphoned away his lifespan. This is true spring blooming, and that was a 3/4 page spread of Taiyo starting to use this, where his body is all smoky and stuff. That was incredible. I loved seeing that. I always love the artwork in this manga, especially during the action sequences and during these really cool moments. I think Gundira, the mangaka, really puts a lot into these panels, a lot of detail and a lot of just coolness into these panels, and so I love that. I liked to see that. But honestly, that's really all I had to say about this chapter. I thought it was good. I think we're continuing the Shinzo little mini arc here, and I look forward to what goes on in the future of this series. So the next series we have to talk about, and the only other series to get a color page this week, which is kind of strange, but we could talk about that maybe at the end of the video, is Nue's Exorcist, which got the only other color page. The color page itself was great. I think it looks good. I think the art of Nue's Exorcist is really good. So I like color pages from this series. They always tend to be useful in depicting the various stances of the characters. And in this one, we see the captains that we've seen in the background, so that was cool. The chapter itself is all about why Nue wants Gakuro to be the 6th captain, and how they're going to get to that point. And honestly, really, the hijinks that kind of ensue, well, I actually think it's funny, specifically the part where Shiroha rolls out Moriyoki on the cart as the prisoner of war, the POW there. I thought that was definitely funny, but besides that, the actual seriousness of the chapter seemed to be about the captains finding out about who Nue is through this idea of Gakuro being like her master, right? We know this is a lie, and it seems like a lot of the captains seem to guess that this is a lie, and they're absolutely right, it is. But it's kind of through that lens, in that vein, that we see them figuring out what Nue's up to, figuring out what Nue's doing. So it was definitely interesting to see, but I think ultimately it's a setup chapter. I honestly hope that Gakuro doesn't become a captain. I'm a little upset because I think that this world is interesting, and I think that I wish we had more on the world. And in 23 chapters, there's only so much world building you can do, right? I don't blame the mangaka for that at all. But at the same time, I think that making Gakuro a captain now is it feels like it's rushing this series along. And a lot of this series has felt like that a lot of the times, where it feels like we are pushing ahead and then we're slowing down for a slice of life thing. But I'm worried about the continuation of Nue's Exorcist, is what I'll say, because this feels awful fast for the grand scope of it. And I could be wrong for sure, but we'll have to see. But honestly, that's really all I had to say about Nue's Exorcist this week. And that will lead us into Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 239 is what came out this week. So this chapter has cut away from what's going on with the main cast, which is terribly unfortunate. JJK was on a break last week, and then we come back this week. I was expecting to see Yuji and the lawyer guy, whose name I always can't remember, fight against Sukuna. I was excited to see what their plan is, but of course, we cut away. It's fine, and we get to see Kenjaku and more of what Kenjaku's up to in another plant, in another colony. So it was interesting. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea who the first two people he fought are. I feel like the guy with the suspenders I was supposed to know, and I feel like we've seen that guy before. I cannot remember their name or even really what they do. The fights themselves were cool, and mainly this chapter was some exposition about what Kenjaku's ultimate goal is, and I believe that we even knew this beforehand. So it's not like this is some crazy new revelation or anything. But we now know that the plan is to forcibly merge the people with Tengen, and to kind of create this new kind of world. So that's interesting, and he's kind of just the top dog right now, and kind of waiting out the Satoru, the Gojo versus Sukuna fight. He was kind of waiting that out. But we see at the end of the chapter, and the thing I really like is the comedian guy. I forget what his name is too. Leave it down in the comments if you know it. But the comedian guy has arrived, and he is fighting against Kenjaku. It seems like they're gonna have a fight. And the thing about his curse technique is anything that he thinks will be funny just becomes reality. And that's an incredibly powerful curse technique. So I'm excited to see how he like when he gets quote unquote serious. I'm excited to see what that actually looks like for him going forward in the series. But it definitely was an interesting chapter, and one that I think will set up for an interesting fight to come ahead, as long as we don't jump back to what Sukuna and everyone else is doing. Although I wouldn't mind that, to be honest with you, because I'm very interested. But I'm also interested in this fight and to see where it goes. But honestly, that's my thoughts on Jujutsu Kaisen this week. Next up, we have My Hero Academia, chapter 404 was released this week. And so I'm going to be honest with you. This chapter, while visually incredible, I don't know that it hit the right emotional chords for me. I don't know if that's just because I'm not as into what's going on right now in MHA or what, but it didn't really hit for me like I wanted it to, like I wanted this to. I mean, most of this chapter we spend thinking that this is the end of All Might, that All Might's going to die. That prophecy that Sir Night Eye had of him, however many years ago, is finally coming true. This is the gruesome death that he is going to face. And even Deku begins to see him like fully formed inside his mind's eye, where he sees all the other One for All users. And so you think it's a done deal, you think he's dead, but Bakugo is back, and they work together to be able to get All Might out of that, and it seems like save All Might's life. I think All Might is going to survive, which I think maybe part of my problem with this is that I just genuinely think it would be a good idea for All Might to die. I thought before, I actually like what he's done in the story in these past couple chapters, what All Might has done. So I can't fully say I think he should have been, axed before, but I think that narratively it might have been better to kill him off earlier in the story than right now. I think that it's kind of a struggle to deal with him in the context he is right now. But that being said, I think he's going to survive, and I think, it really boils down to I just don't love that idea. I think that Midoriya has been able to handle his power. He has gone even further with All Might or further with One for All than All Might ever did by mastering the former user's power quirks, and I think that it's time to let All Might go and let him actually die. I think this would have been a good chapter to do that, but they decided against it. So, and it might be that All Might will still die by the end, but All Might's death has been a thing that has been foreshadowed in this series forever. I mean, I'm currently reading through My Hero Academia in my own collection. I read like a volume a day, and I'm currently reading through that. I just read volume 7 today. And he foreshadows his death all the way back in volume 7. And so for something that has been foreshadowed so much to continuously not happen is maybe a little frustrating, I'll say. I don't know. If you guys really disagree with me, definitely hit me up in the comments and tell me what you think about whether All Might should continue to live or not, and kind of how you feel about My Hero Academia. Because I'm just wondering how people who have been here for a long time, like I have, feel about the series now. But that's not to say, of course, I'm not saying that My Hero Academia isn't a good manga. I like it. But yeah, this chapter was a little frustrating, we'll say, for me. But that's what I have to say about My Hero Academia this week. And that'll bring us to Kagurabachi Chapter 6. This is, as I've made clear, of the 3 newest batch of manga, this one is my favorite, and this chapter, no exception to that rule. I really liked this chapter as well. This chapter is mainly a fighting chapter, though. Nothing really groundbreaking was revealed or anything. We just got a lot of fights. I will say, one thing I think I'm noticing about this mangaka and their way of creating stories is, I think that this mangaka does better. I understand the story better when they use larger panels rather than smaller ones. This chapter had a lot of smaller panels in it, and I would sometimes, if action was contained in those panels, I would have a hard time telling kind of what is exactly going on. I think part of that is there's a heavy emphasis on black. I mean, Chihiro is in black the whole time, and that one opponent that duplicates himself, he was in black as well. And so there was a lot of black this chapter, and I think it just got confusing for me. But overall, I love this manga's art style, and I just think bigger, more expressive panels are good for him or her. I actually don't know who this is, but I think that those bigger, more expressive panels are better for this specific art style, and I love it. I loved the 3/4 spread and top half page spread that happened this week. I thought they were really, really good. As far as Chihiro's just really cool. I think this chapter really just cemented Chihiro's really, really cool. We got to learn about Char and kind of what her deal is. She's, able to heal herself really quickly, and that's why people are after her. So, that's interesting. I'm sure that's going to play into the story coming, going forward. But really, Chihiro is amazing. He took the short sword out and took the sword. It was a really cool chapter. So I really like that. I thought it was really good, and I'm excited to see, where it goes from here. But those are my Kagurabachi thoughts this week. So that'll bring us to talking about Sakamoto Days, chapter 140, which came out this week. Sakamoto Days, big fan, as you probably know if you've listened to this. I'm a big fan of this, and this chapter was a setup chapter, right? It was a setup chapter for what's going to come in the future, for the exhibition arc that we're probably headed into here. And it's training. It was training of the Sakamoto group and training of X's group. It was the training in preparation for this. One of the things that I like is they use the executive of the JAA that they've captured, X's group, in the beginning of this chapter. They use him, we see how spineless he is. It's just weird that he's like an executive of the JAA. He seems so spineless. It's a weird fit for me, but he just seems so incapable. But anyway, They take advantage of him. But what I liked about that part of the chapter is we got to see the two students, the girl and the kid with the paper mask on his face, that they are training. They are invested in this group, in X's, vision here. And it's clear. They are training to take part in this mission. It's so interesting that's happened and where those two have come from when we took the exams earlier in this series. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm interested to see kind of who they go up against if they end up having individual opponents later on in the story. But that's for another day. We also see Shin and Sakamoto training. They're fighting each other in training, and that was so cool. Shin has improved so much. Obviously, he's still not on par with Sakamoto, but he's improved a ton, and that's really, really cool to see. I definitely can appreciate that about Shin. But we also see the Order has prepared for this day as well. And so we're seeing these three different factions, the Order, X, and Sakamoto's group. We're seeing them prepare for this exhibition. We're preparing for this day. And this is kind of the setup chapter for that. So I'm excited to see what that exhibition arc looks like when we actually get to it, probably next week, to be honest with you. I assume it's going to start next week, but either way, it's definitely looking interesting, and it's cool. Sakamoto is really cool, and we're probably going to get more fighting and more action. And the thing that I think the author of Sakamoto Days does so well is choreograph action. It's amazing choreography. So I look forward to seeing that. But really, that's all I had to say about Sakamoto Days this week. And that'll bring us to Undead Unluck. This week, chapter 180 was released, and oh boy, was this a big one. This was a huge Undead Unluck chapter this week, but we'll get into why exactly that is. A couple things I wanted to point out. First of all, Sick is still not down, which makes sense, but is also a little frustrating. I would have loved for Latla and Rip to actually have taken down Sick, but also, one of you pointed out, because I was kind of like last week, I was like, why is Fuko even able to operate at all? And Jinga, I think, in my comments, pointed out that because she's lived for so long, she probably has mastered this art, kind of like Andy did, or like Jui's did in the last loop. And so that's exactly what happened. I mean, we see here, that's exactly why she knows how to operate so well, and Rip is obviously blown away by her abilities. But the biggest thing this chapter, and really the only thing of huge worth to talk about, is we finally, after so long, we finally get to see Andy again. And this is only a clone, right? There's a couple things that I absolutely love about this pseudo reunion. One, Andy comes in to save the day at the last second, and he's overconfident like he always had been. In Andy's absence, Fuko has become an incredible character, I think. And so for him to return now, I think it's going to be interesting for us to remember who Andy is and become acquainted with that again. But I love that Fuko doesn't even look at him, doesn't even look up, but simply gives him the command, and he goes and does it. They don't look at each other. They don't have like a moment of reunion. They just go. They just do what they have to do. I love that. I mean, that's incredible. Fuko has become such an amazing character, and to have the resolve to do this, to have contact with this person who you've been searching for 100 years, and to finally have that contact and not give in to that, not get emotional about that. Oh, Fuko's so cool. Fuko's so cool now. And Andy, obviously, I've always thought Andy was super, super cool. So that was really cool. I like that all of this was like initiated by an accident, by Fuko, by a strand of Fuko's hair touching Rip by accident, right? This is the first time that Fuko's plan has deviated from what she intended. And so I love that in that one instance where her plans have faltered, who shows up to save her but Andy? Of course Andy shows up to save her. So I loved this chapter. This was awesome. I was so happy to see Andy again. I did not think we were going to see Andy again this soon. I didn't know when we were going to see him, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be this chapter, and I was so hyped to see him again. So I loved this chapter, and that's what I have to say about Undead Unluck for sure. The next chapter we got to discuss is Mama Yuyu. Chapter 7 was released this week. So after last week's incredible chapter, with a great twist, right? We pick up where we left off with the Ascaba, I think that's his name, the demon lord from another dimension, standing over Alicia, and Corleo ready to fight. And they do fight. We see a lot of their fight. And in that fight, we learn some important things about this world. First of all, we learn a little bit more about sigil sorcery and what that is. So the sigils on the back of their hands have 5 points, either for the hero or for the demon lord, right? And when you use sigil sorcery, the sigils are consumed in a clockwise fashion, and they depending on the amount of power that you output. And we see throughout this battle that Corleo's sigils are consumed much quicker than Ascaba's. And that's probably because Ascaba is much more accustomed to using his abilities than Corleo is to using his. But we also learn that Corleo has awakened 2 abilities. Levitation, which we knew and we had seen, and healing, which I think we also knew. I think that was from Evan. But I think... But what this kind of showed to me is, one, I think that means that Corleo will have the ability to awaken more abilities in the future. Why that's important is because the 2 abilities he has right now, it could be that he sticks with these 2 abilities and we find creative ways to use levitation and healing, right? And we've seen a lot of characters with like regenerative factors and healing factors. And so it's possible that that's going to get improved. And I think in a world where we're mostly fighting with swords and stuff, levitation could be interesting. I just don't think that that's all. You know, I don't think that's the whole deal. And so I think that we're going to get more abilities as the series goes forward, which is all good for me. I think Corleo's smart in the way he fights. I like that Corleo is a guy who's trying to survive. He's using his smarts. He's saying, okay, this guy uses shadows. I got to take out these lamps. And so, you know, I like that. Overall, I liked the chapter. I thought it was a really good chapter. My main comments about this chapter come kind of about what I think is going to happen in the future. This whole time, I felt like at any point, we were going to be told that this was an act, that Pinello or someone else, maybe that Ben guy, told Escaba and Alicia to stage this so that Alicia lay down. It looked like she was injured, and Escaba was supposed to stand over like the villain to push Corleo to awakening his abilities. I still think this is going to happen. I think that next chapter, this fight is going to be stopped by Pinello, by somebody who's going to say that this was a ruse. And maybe it was just a ruse by Escaba. You know what? Now that I'm kind of vocalizing it, I think maybe Escaba wanted to test Corleo and see kind of what Corleo is really made of. And so maybe he didn't even get Alicia in on it at all. And that's like some kind of like phantom thing he was able to create. But either way, I don't think this is I don't think Escaba's really evil. I don't think so. And so I think that this is going to be the 3-man cell here, the 3-man team of Corleo, Escaba, and Alicia is going to be going forward in the story what we're going to do. And this is the moment that really cements the animosity and rivalry between Corleo and Escaba, which is something I think that they would have missed if this didn't happen. Now, I could totally be wrong and I could totally be off, and this could not be at all what's happening. But I won't be surprised if next week we find out that this was a ruse, either by Pinello or Escaba, to push Corleo or find out what Corleo is truly made of. So those are my thoughts on Mama Yuyu. Another very exciting chapter for sure. And that'll bring us to our next chapter, which is Martial Master Asumi. This time, chapter 18 was released. And, oh man, this was another really good chapter. This is the start of the fight between Nito and Taiga. And we knew that this fight was going to be incredible. Or at least I knew that this fight was going to be incredible. And just the start of this fight was really great. The chapter really deals a lot with Taiga's background, where he comes from, and his process so far. You know, he was an orphan. He grew up in an orphanage, actually a very good orphanage. He doesn't have that kind of dark past, but the darkness does creep in. The MMA gym he joined was terrible. I mean, borderline abusive, these people, right? I mean, Taiga was a kid. He is a kid still, but they were absolutely terrible. And so Taiga is determined to pull himself up from that dust and come into the limelight of this hero, his MMA hero who he saw fight one time as a younger man. And so I love that story. I love Taiga's motivation. I like that he's, what he's in this for and all of that. So I think it's really cool. I think it's awesome. And the start of this fight is incredible. I also love that we spend a little time with Nito too, this chapter, just like confirming that, like, he's like, I want to do everyone proud. I want to win this tournament. I want to face Kazuro in the ring. I want to be able to get him and Grandpa to reunite, right? He reaffirms his resolve at the start of the match. And then when they hit into each other, right? Nito tries to use that flying knee again and Taiga blocks it. Both of them say he's tough at the same time. I love this. I think that these two are now lifelong rivals. I think if you guys know a manga called Hajime no Ippo, it's super long, and it is a sports manga about boxing. I love Hajime no Ippo. There is a character called Miyata in that manga, and him and Ippo start out kind of as rivals, and they grow kind of as rivals too. And I think that what we're seeing here with Nito and Taiga is a similar kind of thing. These two are going to be rivals for a long, long time. And so I'm really excited to see where the story goes and where the story takes their rivalry and hopefully eventually friendship. So I think that this was an awesome Martial Master Asumi chapter, and I can't wait for next week. And that brings us to Akane-Banashi chapter 83 that came out this week. So this chapter was another very good one. Another one involving Chocho. I like Chocho a lot, as I've mentioned before on this podcast. It's no surprise to you. But this chapter focused entirely on the game of Cho-Han that they were playing between Akane, Karashi, and third character Un-Un. I think that's how you say his name. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But I really don't have a ton to say about this chapter, other than I really love Chocho. I love the gimmick of this that the dice are loaded to only roll evens, so they only roll Cho. And I love how each of the characters got there. Un didn't figure it out at all, kind of showing his naivety and, you know, not being ready to really take on Chocho as a master. Karashi analytically solved the puzzle. He was like, I got it. I know what's going on. It's always going to be Cho. And Akane went with her gut, and she just truly gambled everything she had at the end. And I think, so what I love about this is it shows that Karashi is able to pass the test because of his intelligence and his analytical wit. But Akane is able to pass the test because she is like Chocho. She has the same nin, as they call it. And so I thought that was really cool. I really liked that. And the end of the chapter kind of hints to Chocho maybe reuniting with that other friend of his, the other member of the Arch 4 of the Arakawa school. So I'm interested to see that come to fruition and to see what happens there going forward. But yeah, I liked this chapter a lot, but that's really all I had to say about Akane-Banashi. And that will lead me to Blue Box chapter 122, which came out this week. And what I liked about this chapter was it really felt like a traditional sports manga chapter. But before we get into that, I did like the stuff with Akari before. I think her name is Akari, right? Hyodo's little sister. I like the stuff with her before, in the morning during practice, and how this is kind of like Chinatsu and Taiki. Like, she is doing the same thing that those two did. So what's interesting about this, right, is that, like, if Chinatsu wasn't here, right, could the same situation that happened with Taiki and Chinatsu happen between Taiki and Akari? Because, I mean, she's a year younger than him. She comes in early morning for practices, and they even have another similarity, which is they're both into badminton. So I think that there is definitely some parallels happening here that are interesting. I just like how Chinatsu seems to be able to brush it off right now. I don't know if that's always going to be the case, but it seems like that is right now, and that she's genuinely proud of who Taiki is becoming. And I love that. That's adorable. It's great to see. But the main part that I loved about this chapter was the focus on the boys' badminton team and how Haruto is an addition to this team that is useful, and of how Taiki really is a senior member of this team. He's not a freshman anymore. He's moved up in the ranks, and while Haru is obviously the top guy on the team, Taiki is second, and Taiki is not that far behind, and he proves this by going one-on-one with Haruto, this, the new freshman who has continually not, seen Taiki's value and thought Taiki was a freshman like himself. So I love this. I love that Taiki was shown completely able to face Haruto, and, so if I'm almost like kind of pseudo power scaling the badminton players, right? Taiki should be better. Taiki should be better than Haruto, because we know that Yusa, from Haruto's older brother, is a little better than Taiki, and that's Taiki's goal. And so I think the little brother should be able to be beat by Taiki, and I think we see that here. So that's not, crazy, but I did like this chapter a lot. I thought it was very good. And that will bring us to the Elusive Samurai. This week, chapter 130 was released. And I don't want to downplay this. I think the Elusive Samurai is a great series. It's, one I collect personally, so I definitely view it in high regard. So I don't want to say that it's not a series that I view in high regard, because it is. But that being said, this chapter in particular, I don't have a ton to say about. We touched on this fact that it's kind of a tragedy that Ienaga had to die at 17, and kind of not a tragedy that Akane, kind of chimes in. and there's an interesting debate there, and I don't know that I'm that interested in that debate. I think that it was a noble choice that Ienaga made, and I totally get that. And we see Uesugi, and I might be saying his name totally wrong. We see him kind of double down on Ienaga's plans and try to rally the troops. And so I think he is going to get more serious about this in the coming days, in the coming chapters. And we get a lot of the political dealings this chapter, right? The Emperor Go-Daigo, as well as Takauji, in their various camps and all the things that we see going on with them. And so Tokiyuki has come back to Kamakura finally. This is something we've been looking forward to, and it's finally happened, and it's good that it's happened. I like that we're here. I just don't have a ton to say about it this week. So that's my thoughts on the Elusive Samurai. And so that will bring us to Cipher Academy. This week, chapter 45 was released. It was a very good chapter, but I will say, this is the kind of chapter that I'm talking about when I'm saying sometimes Cipher Academy honestly just goes over my head. I'm not sure I can really grasp the code, grasp the battle that they're having. And this chapter was kind of an example of that. This form of craps, this endless craps that Kubanashi and Tayuta are playing is very complicated, and I don't pretend to know exactly what's going on, but I get the gist of it. And so the gist is essentially we were going over how Tayuta, even though she is incredibly skilled and incredibly smart, probably the smartest member of Class 1A, right? Even though she's like that, she has this terrible luck, and that's like a thing with really smart people, says Kobanai. So we'll see kind of where that goes from that. But the actual battle with Kubanashi is really interesting. I like how Tayuta wins, and Tayuta is just the smartest member of this school. She is like leaps and bounds above everyone else. So I don't know why anyone else would argue about that, but yeah, Tayuta is just leagues above everybody else. But honestly, that's all I had to say about Cipher Academy this week. I don't have a lot of other thoughts. Just to highlight that, like, this is an example of a chapter that I struggled to kind of grasp, I think, fully. And I think maybe if I was a Japanese speaker and I read this in its original translation, I think I might get it a little more. But, yep, that's kind of my thoughts on Cipher Academy this week. And that will bring us to Icehead Gill. This week, chapter 17 was released. And oh boy, does this feel like we are running to the finish line. I'm fairly confident that the next round of cuts, Icehead Gill is going to get axed. I'm not very confident on anything else that's going to get cut, but I do think Icehead Gill is not going to make it. And this chapter was another rush to the finish line. I felt rushed. I didn't really like it. I wouldn't say I didn't like it. I actually did enjoy the chapter. It feels very rushed, and that's hard to kind of get behind, It's hard to kind of feel the emotions of the characters when I feel like I don't really know them. We were introduced to two new characters, Orden, Sol, and Varther, who I'm not going to try to say his last name. Two other captains of different kind of brigades, right? And so Orden's last name is Sol, which makes me think he's somehow related to Gill and Dreki, whose last names are also Sol. So, I don't know what the relationship is there. We didn't really explore that, but I'm interested to see in that. And I think these characters are interesting. I think the squirrel with Varther is kind of funny. I want to see more about that. And mainly, we see Gill's expression when he sees his dad. And that expression in the last panel of this chapter is just kind of like, is care. It looks caring, and so I'm worried about what that's going to mean for Gill. I'm worried that he's going to put a little too much stock into having found his dad again, and so we'll see what happens next chapter. But like I said, I don't know how long Icehead Gill is going to be around. I think maybe this manga might be headed for the crossroads here, but time will tell as we march forward into the last couple issues of this year of Weekly Shonen Jump. But yeah, that's what I had to say about Icehead Gill. So that brings us to Kill Blue. This week, chapter 26 came out, and it was another really good chapter. I thought it was funny. I thought I read the beginning of this chapter. I thought the whole chapter was going to be one of those silent chapters, right? Where they just do little pictures in the word bubbles when they have to. And it's just a collection of different panels with different pictures, and they were going to tell the story silently. And because they do that for the first several pages until Ogami screams out in the forest that he loves his normal school life. I just think it's so funny that this incredible hitman, this incredible assassin is like, he just loves like learning. He loves being a middle school student so much. It's really funny. I think the premise itself is funny, and this chapter, to highlight it like that, was really funny. And of course, that normal middle school life is taken away immediately when he calls a council of the 3 different assassin organizations to all come together and to say, hey, no beef at the school. To which everybody seems kind of cool with, except for the Binky guy, and I forget what his name is. Leave it down in the comments if you know it, but he is not cool with it. He attacks Kazuma, and Eiji, like, protects him. The Rindo brothers, they're gonna have some problems, and the Binky guy really like swears that like Ogami did not do a good enough job protecting Noren, so now he's with them all the time. So that's kind of wacky hijinks that I'm sure is only going to last for this chapter. If it continues in the next chapter, maybe we'll get more on that plot point, but I don't really view it as a plot point so much as it's a gag to continue, the funny side of this manga. This whole chapter is more of a funny chapter, and less serious. But I do like this manga a lot. I think Kill Blue is really good, and I think it might go on for a while. So I'm definitely into it. I'm excited to see what kind of happens next. And that will bring us to me and Roboco. This week, chapter 158 was released, and I liked a lot of things about this chapter. We actually do continue the alternate Roboco timeline thing that we started before, where they're trying to figure out how to send the other Robocos back and why they're here. I like the bit about the sci-fi Roboco being like just photocopies because the artist can't draw it again, and I thought that was really funny. I love when the mangaka makes those kind of meta jokes in this series. I think it's really funny. So I like that was, continuing. I think that was really funny. I liked all this stuff with the action, the 500 million copy Roboco, the battle Shonen Roboco. I thought a lot of stuff with her was really cool. You just feel like funny, just like those funny panels. Showa era Roboco is not that funny to me. I don't know if maybe I'm just missing the point, and I probably am just missing the point. Obviously, in the Showa era of manga, I wasn't a manga fan. I don't even think I was born. So obviously, I don't have a connection to that kind of joke or anything like that. So that might be why I don't, I'm not, rolling over on that. But I love how at the end of the chapter we find out that aliens are invading Earth, and that's why the Robocos are together, and that all the Robocos are going to have to fight the aliens. So I'm interested to see if next chapter we just skip forward and all the Robocos are back where they belong and the aliens are gone, or if we actually are going to see some kind of altercation between these Robocos and the aliens. Either way, I thought that this chapter was really good and pretty funny in the jokes that it pulled and all of that. So yeah, I liked me and Roboco this week, but that's what I had to say. And that will bring us to the Ichinose family's deadly sins. This chapter was chapter 46 that came out this week. I struggle to fully put into words. This is a very confusing manga, right? As a whole, I think all of us would agree. All of us that have read this from the start would agree that the Ichinose family's deadly sins has been a very confusing manga from the beginning, but I have always felt that it is an extremely interesting manga, and I have felt that pretty much from day one, and this chapter was again no exception to that. Kakeru is such an interesting character, driven by this jealousy sort of, and really want to be needed, want to be looked on admirably, to be respected by his father and his mother and his whole family. This has driven him to do really what I think is terrible things. So we learn what the grandfather, whose name I'm missing, but Kakeru's father, the grandfather of the family, we've learned that his study is on these dreams, and he's made this, whatever concoction that Kakeru has, he's made that to allow to have this reoccurring dream. And Kakeru has been using that to keep the family stuck in that perpetual dream as his answer to, look, this is what I can do. I can provide happiness for my family if they just stay like this. I'm worth something then. But we see that the mom and the grandma, I know the grandma's name is Sachi, but they're up. And the mom at first, it talks to him, and he has these flashbacks to him growing up and just being a disappointment. What he felt was a disappointment to his father and to his whole family. And then when Sota came along, Sota was so incredible. He did everything so right that the grandfather was hard on him. And he interpreted that to mean that Sota was better and that Kakeru himself didn't deserve any attention, any love there. And that's really sad, I think. And I think this is a really tragic look. And luckily, I think at the end, he begins to see the error of his ways. Now, one thing I'll say is the kind of the nature of this manga makes it seem like at any point it could be over. And this is another one of those points. Sota is waking up and he's facing his father. And really, Sota has become an enemy in the eyes of Kakeru. And so this is the relationship that has to be rebuilt if the Ichinose family is going to continue, is the relationship between this father and this son. Right? Sachi has already said that what they meant, they thought that Kakeru was extremely talented, but not in a way that they were familiar with. And so, the father, as like a scientist, and he's not familiar with how to encourage an artistic side, which Kakeru had. And so they ended up here. But now Sota's waking up, and we're going to see what his reaction to this is. And my guess is one of two things. I think that if the goal of this manga is to wrap up in the next cycle, if this manga is going to end in the next round of cuts, then I think Sota will forgive Kakeru right away. If that's not what's happening, I think Sota will become very angry with Kakeru. And if I had to guess, I'm going to say he's going to be angry. That's what I think Sota's going to do. He's going to be very upset with Kakeru. I don't know if Kakeru is going to say the whole thing to him or not, but I definitely think something like that's going to happen. I really like this manga, and this chapter was another incredible example of a great the Ichinose family's Deadly Sins chapter. So that's what I thought about it. I really liked it. And that will bring us to our second to last chapter this week, which was 2 on Ice. This week, chapter 5 was released. And before I say anything else, what I want to say about this chapter is it was gorgeous. The artwork this chapter was on another level. It was so beautiful. And this manga has been beautiful to look at in the past, but it's very, very beautiful to look at. This mangaka has done an incredible job with depicting the art the way that they want to. And so that's absolutely incredible. Now, the story itself, I also thought was really good. I think we got the backstory with who Takun is, right? He's a senior figure skater who wanted to do pairs and left to do pairs. But it seems like gave up on that, right? Later on in life. And this inspired Kisara to want to do that. And so she tries to enter the world of pairs, right? Because this is a way in which she can continue to improve in the figure skating world, even though, as a woman, she's not going to be able to compete technically with the men in strength. It's just not the way that these things develop, right? And so to kind of stave that off, she wants to get involved in singles, and her coach totally rejects her and abandons her for this. And now we start to see why there are only 6 figure skating pairs in all of Japan. It's because it's so ostracized like this. I mean, this is ridiculous. And this is kind of, I think, coming from my American bias. There are, I'm sure, hundreds of figure skating pairs in America. There are, if not thousands. I mean, if you wanted to do this, there's no way you would be stopped from doing this, right? In our country, but Japan, it doesn't work the same. And so I think maybe some of my, I'm from America bias is kind of showing on this issue, but it's sad. It's just sad, I think. She found her avenue and she did this. But the main point she wants to make is to give Hayuma the choice, right? She wants Hayuma to try a competition, a singles figure skating competition. And once he tries that, to make the choice as to whether he wants to skate in pairs with Kisara, or whether he wants to do singles, whether he wants to continue and improve and continue in the world of singles men's figure skating, which is kind of the way that naturally, logically, we would think that he would go. Now, I do have a complaint about this. What I kind of wanted, and not really a complaint, but just an interesting observation. What I wanted to see here was for Hayuma to immediately say, "What are you talking about? Of course I'm going to pair up with you," right? I wanted it to be so obvious to Hayuma that he had no doubts. And maybe we'll get into that next chapter, or maybe we're going to see him participate in that single men's figure skating competition, which would be interesting to see him train and practice and all of that. But I was kind of disappointed that he wasn't more on board immediately. And so we'll see kind of going forward how this plays out. But I really wish he would have been super on board with Kisara from the get-go. But it's all right. We'll see what happens. And it was a very good chapter either way. So I definitely liked it. But that's my thoughts on 2 on Ice this week. And that will bring us to our final chapter for this episode and this week in Weekly Shonen Jump, which was Witch Watch chapter 130. And this was definitely an impactful chapter. Another impactful chapter. First of all, the villain here, the plant warlock, is super strong. You guys know last week I was blown away with what happened at the end of the chapter, right? But this week, to follow it up, he is just an incredibly skilled warlock. I love that Ran jumped in to confront him and to kind of lock him down while Nico tried to revive Moe. And it's interesting. It's interesting that how they ended up doing this, right? Witch Recovery is a spell that we knew about, right? Something that you had to sacrifice something of equal value to recover something. And of course, there is nothing of value to Nico more than Moe's life. And so what happens when she uses Witch Recovery? First of all, beautiful art. Beautiful 2-page spread of Nico using Witch Recovery and the little light birds flying out of her, right? And she is able to have Moe recover. But she is now, looks like a little kid and has let go of her time. She sacrificed the time that she spent with them, which is tragic. I mean, this reminds me of, and light spoiler alert for The Promised Neverland, or maybe big spoiler alert. But this reminds me of what happens to Emma at the end of The Promised Neverland a little bit. And so we'll see next chapter kind of where this goes and what becomes of this. But I think we've got a lot of Witch Watch ahead of us. I am interested to see what goes on, and I really like this chapter. I thought this was a great way to use Witch Recovery, a spell that we knew about from the past, and so I definitely thought it was really good. But those are my thoughts on Witch Watch this week. And that will lead us into the wrap-up for this episode. Just to let you all know, One Piece was on break this week. It was off. Obviously, I didn't cover it. It wasn't, a new chapter didn't get released in the magazine. And so we didn't cover that, although I believe it is supposed to be back in the magazine next week, so we should be seeing that again next week. Also, I think next week we're going to get 3 color page chapters, so that'll be great. We're going to get that, and as we wrap up, begin to wrap up this year of Weekly Shonen Jump. I'm really looking forward to being able to do another year of Weekly Shonen Jump video after the last issue of this year is out. And so look forward to that if that's something that you look forward to. But before we go, I got to give my top 3. What would I send back in the Weekly Shonen Jump survey this week? And my number 3 manga this week was Martial Master Asumi. It's no shocker that I'm a fan of this manga, that this is one of my favorites running right now, and so it definitely earns my number 3 spot. I thought the Taiga stuff was great. Number 2 this week is the Ichinose family's Deadly Sins. I know I put this up at the top, several weeks I've done this since I've been back, but honestly, guys, I really just love it that much. I think that this is my second favorite, and this chapter was very, very influential and very, very impactful, I think, for the story. So I really, really liked it. And my number 1 this week, which you might have guessed, is Undead Unluck. The return of a certain character was incredible and something I've been looking forward to for months, if not years. And so I'm very hype about that. I thought it was a great chapter, and I look forward to where the story is going to go from there. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked anything I had to say, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, rate the podcast and subscribe to the podcast. Hopefully I'm going to bring these out every single week. It might be a little late like this one, but either way, I think they're going to come out every single week. So look forward to that. And if you had anything to say, comment down in the comment section. I'd love to get involved in your comments and see what you have to say. But until next time, this is Shonen Express signing out.